All right, it's another great day. Dan, how are you doing today?
Mason, I'm great. Just had an awesome interview with Reed Goossens. I enjoyed that.
Oh yeah, it was a ton of fun. He's a way cooler Australian version of us that's further along and seems like a really fun guy to get to hang out with, but is also doing business at an extremely high level and has a really fantastic podcast that he hosts as well.
Yeah, so Reed Goossens, many of you have probably already heard about him, but he originally moved to the U.S. from Australia in 2012, and he bought a $38,000 property in upper state New York to start his real estate journey. Yet today he owns RSM Property Group. His company controls over $500 million worth of U.S. commercial, specifically apartments, real estate, which is crazy. He's the author of 2 best-selling books on Amazon, Investing in the U.S., The Ultimate Guide to U.S. Real Estate, and 10,000 Miles to the American Dream, Our Story of Financial Freedom. And he's also the host of the successful podcast called Investing in the U.S., where he interviews people far ahead of Mason and I, like Joe Fairless and some of the other name brand or household names you'll have heard of. And I think his story does a good job of illustrating, I mean, if you can move across the world and build a business like this in a little over a decade, I mean, there's really nothing you can't do. So I'm excited. Let's bring him in.
All right, Reed Goossens, how are you doing today?
Good, boys. How are you?
Doing wonderful. It's another beautiful day. And to get things started, this question might sound familiar, but rewind the clock and tell us how you made your first ever dollar as a kid.
I made my first dollar selling bags of crappy dirt in my front of my parents' house. We had quite a busy street back in Coolum Beach in Australia. And I had like those little sandwich bags, and we'd just go to my parents' garden and get the dirt. It was probably full of rocks and crap. And my parents gave money to my neighbors I found out years later that to buy the crappy dirt bags from me. But ever since I was little, I've always been trying to like sell stuff on the side of the road. And I remember having this like little table that I don't know if I made it or someone else made it. It was like $5, and it was $5 was a lot of money. I was like, if I can sell this, I'll be crushing it, and no one bought my crappy little table. So, it started from being a young kid.
That's awesome. So, to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, how are you making money now? What are you doing now, and how'd you get from selling crappy bags of dirt in Australia to what you're doing today?
Yeah, look. I run a company called RSM Property Group. We syndicate multifamily assets across the US. We have acquired a total of $800 million of assets since 2014. But moved to the US in 2012 to chase a girl. She's now my wife. My background's in structural engineering. I moved to the States just to live in New York City and chase my wife. And within 6 months of being fresh off the boat, I'd bought my first triplex property in upstate New York. And, about a year later, I bought a second one and then flipped a house. And then I started the podcast in 2014, started raising money. And, there's a lot of stories in there. But, today it looks green card problems, like all the things that you think of as being an immigrant, I had to, tackle. But it was, what I do today is my majority is syndication, raising money from investors and looking at great opportunities. We think are great opportunities in today's environment. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about what today's environment looks like. But yeah, that's sort of in a nutshell what we do.
Excellent. So there's a lot of different topics we want to hit on there, but one thing I don't want to skip over, I saw in your bio, you were involved in the infrastructure development for the 2012 Summer Olympic Games, and you mentioned your background as a engineer. Can you speak to maybe a little bit about that project? Because that's just cool, but then also how that experience has helped you in growing your own business.
Yeah, so that project, so I was fresh out of uni in 2007, was working part of the sort of requirements of graduating from Australian University with an engineering degree is that you had to have X amount of time working as an intern, essentially, for American audience. So before you graduate, in your summers, you'd go get internships. It was paid. And the company I was working for, Mott McDonald in Australia, I knew they had the contract on some of the big projects in London. And I was like, hey guys, look, I'll pay my own way to get over there. I'll do my own visa. I want to live abroad. But would you, if you had a job, like a low paying job over there, I'll go do it. And it turned out that I was I had no experience. But I was on this team working with an architecture firm at London Bridge, and we were doing what's called the Paddington Integrated Project. If you know Paddington Bear, that station's very iconic. So people would fly in from Heathrow, they'd get on the underground, and the first station they would see, coming to the games was this Paddington station. That was getting a whole refurb, and I was part of one of the team members, a part of that refurbishment project. And I went back a couple of years ago, and it's interesting to see what you think back in 2008, 2009 was really modern and cool is now a little bit dated already. It's 2020. I think it was 2021 we went traveling there. So, but to your second question, it actually that specific didn't give me the skill set to take me to go do my own business. What did give me the skill set? It helped me along a journey that when I moved to the US, I was an engineer as well here for a couple of years. And then I moved to LA back in 2014. I still had to have a job to be in this country. And so I was like, but I got to the point of I didn't want to keep being an engineer. And I then started realizing that I was like, I've got a skill set that maybe I could work for a developer. So maybe can I use my skills to work in the business in a corporate America and continue to grow my experience. And so that's what I did. I went off and I was working for a structural engineering firm in downtown Los Angeles, and they were an engineer for some big developers. I literally reached out to them, cold emailing them, saying, hey, I'm a structural engineer with 7-8 years experience. I'm looking for project management. I'm looking to pivot. And one of them reached back out to me, and I ended up working for them for 4 years, and finally got my green card in 2017. And at that time, I was also doing syndication on the side, and I'd led as a lead GP on 1,000 units. By the time I quit the day job, I'd already had 1,000 units under the belt at that stage. So a lot of stuff to unpack there, but it was, to your original question, engineering helped me create a skill set that was valuable for someone else for me to then continue to learn about the business of real estate investing and development and all that stuff. So kind of a roundabout way of answering that question.
No. I think that's important to highlight because, if you're listening to this and you're still in a job and you're looking to start a business in some niche of real estate or expand your business, thinking through how you can use the skills that you do have or the career that you are in the meantime to get you closer to the people that are where you want to be so you can get in their world, network with them, potentially work for them, and eventually learn and be like them or partners with them. That's smart. That's the way to do it, to use what you have to get where you want. So I think that's an important lesson there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Reed, I think you did a really great job of outlining how your career and your educational background prior to jumping into this world gave you the technical experience to be successful here. But something that I feel like you're really great at is storytelling, and humans love narrative. So how do you feel like developing the soft skill of storytelling has helped you grow your audience, both on your podcast, as well as giving investors, your ability to develop trust with investors?
Yeah, I completely agree. Having a storytelling ability is important. But the beauty about storytelling is that everyone's got a story. So it's like we're not unique in that way. It's just who resonates with that story. So being an engineer is it's a muscle. It's not something that I was just born straight out of the womb. I remember starting the podcast and being such an imposter monster syndrome of who's going to listen to this? This is 2014. No one, who the hell am I to tell people about real estate investing? And over those sort of 10,000 hours, as I say, it was developing that muscle to tell a good story and know what people want to resonate with, but also understanding that as life evolves, more stories will develop as well, right? That's part of a story that was going on 10 years ago now, more coming to the US. Today, I've got other stories that I can talk about, that has helped define who I am and as a business leader and all that other stuff, which is just important. And so I think that back to your, you can work on it, one, but two, stories evolve over time. And, that old saying of Tony Robbins says, change your life, change your story. That is so important with so many people probably listening to this podcast. You got to go out and do that. And I think there's so much to unpack there with, being afraid of changing, the status quo and all that stuff. But if you're not willing to do that, then you just won't, your life won't change. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think probably having the Australian accent helps most of all. My mom says I have the face for radio. But so, with that being said, you tell stories in a lot of different ways. You tell it on your podcast that you're hosting. You've been on a number of episodes, and you've also written a couple books, which books are the oldest form of media. You're constantly posting on social media, and you're consistent about it and put great content out there. Of these different mediums, which do you feel like has proven the most valuable to you?
It has to be the podcast, right? But I speak about this at a couple of events, and part of one of the chapters in one of the books behind me, the 10,000 Miles to the American Dream, which you can see in the background there. I talk about this 6P rule of developing a personal brand, and one of those P's is platform. And there's so many different ways of platform. Like podcasting is a platform. Hosting a conference is a platform. Having a monthly newsletter is a platform. Writing a weekly blog is a platform. And so it's for those people listening, it's what do you resonate with? And for me, I hate writing. I tried it. And the podcasting was a great way to have a good conversation. And it was a way for me to, even though at the beginning I wasn't, quote unquote, the expert, and I'm still learning and I don't consider myself an expert, but it was to talk to other people in the industry and be on the same energy wavelength as them and just have a fantastic conversation about whatever might come up. And through doing that a lot has helped build a really awesome platform. And from that, I've taken, my first book, Investing in the US, is literally just the first 20 episodes of my podcast transcribed into book form, with the help of a ghostwriter and all that sort of stuff. And then the second book was me and 7 other Aussies who have all been on the show, have all made the pilgrimage across the ditch to the US and has started real estate investment companies. We just decided to write a book together. And so that's, things can evolve into other mediums, into other digital assets that can help propel the brand. And then from those books, you write audiobooks, and audiobooks is just transcribing it into an audio. So through one time of recording, I've been able to, piece together multiple evergreen content that can help propel the brand forward.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. I bookmarked a question I had to your previous response too. So I like how you've done a good job. You mentioned you and a number of other Australians wrote that book together, where obviously that's going to appeal to a very specific audience who's really going to want to invest with you, listen to your content, and just do business with you. And it's a reminder to me and conversations Mason and I have had many times of, we're not going to appeal to everybody. Some people aren't going to like us. Some people aren't going to resonate with us. And then there will be a group that does. And it's important not to be too vanilla and actually have opinions and have a personal brand to make sure that you, just like you did with you and 7 other Australians, create a specific niche that you thrive in and everyone in that niche wants to come to you. I think that's smart and that's important for us.
100%. Like you aren't, the idea is not to be, and maybe some people do, right? A Tony Robbins or a, Tim Ferriss with millions of followers. Like, great. If you want to go out and do that, it's very freaking hard and it's a whole business in itself being a public figure and that stuff. But you can still have a voice and in a niche and have an audience. You can have 500 people. You have 500 investors. You can do multiple 7-figure deals consistently year in, year out. You don't have to have the hundreds and millions of followers. And so a lot of people think you have to be like that. The purpose of building a brand isn't about being the next Tony Robbins or being the next Dalai Lama. It's about advertising yourself to someone who may happen to hear you and resonate with your story, resonate with your brand, who then wants to do business with you. And you may piss off a lot of people, and that's okay because they're not going to come and do business with you. You won't even hear from them. So, at the end of the day, a personal brand is about attracting people who resonate with you. That's the only, think of a light and moths coming to the flame. You're not going to attract every moth. You're going to attract some moths. And if you don't put yourself out there in a way that's authentic to who you are around a brand, you won't attract anyone. And so attracting a few is better than attracting no one. So that's how I look at it. And it's consistency as well, right? A lot of people do start digital content and they give up very quickly. Like I mentioned earlier, like I've been doing my podcast. I remember pre-recording my podcast in 2014, launching in 2015. And it's been going for, the better part of nearly a decade now, which is insane to think. But it's just opened so many doors for me. And I get $0 from my podcast. But the return on investment from putting myself out there, from being able to raise money, be able to talk to people in an educated manner, being able to put out good content about other people I interview and get their thoughts on the market, has helped me build a brand and a platform and a company that I can go, raise money and buy deals, and we can all sort of, invest together.
Yeah. So 1,000 True Fans is an article. I'm forgetting who wrote it, but it emphasizes your point, Reed, about you don't need, millions of followers if you have 1,000 true fans. So that's worth reading for the audience. And then this whole point hits on the overarching idea that Mason and I have talked about many times, of many of the things that are worth doing that will create the most exponential results. You don't get a lot of result from it first, and you have to do them for a long time. And then you look back 5 or 10 years down the road, you're like, wow, I am glad I stuck with that, even though I got nothing out of it for the first couple of years. And so whether it's some of the first investment properties I bought, or hosting a real estate group here in Colorado, I have many examples of that in my own life. But Reed, something I wanted to backtrack here for a second, which applies to really all aspects of your business. You said imposter syndrome. You had a bit of, when you started your podcast, who am I to talk about real estate? I'm not an expert. I'm not a billionaire. And so both with hosting the podcast and then starting to raise money, how did you get over that? And at the same time, not pretend to know something you didn't, and start to raise capital and host the podcast, and kind of balance those two things of speaking confidently, but not speaking on things you didn't know about.
Yeah, everyone goes through it. And there's different elements and stages of imposter syndrome, right? And the more you do it, the more you're going to be comfortable with it. So like, think of like going and working out, right? Like you can read about it and that sounds good and you become knowledgeable that way. But until you open the door and get on the treadmill, like it ain't going to do anything, right? And the more consistent you are, the more it's going to give back to you. And so, like the working out analogy, you don't have to go and work out 7 days a week to be fit. You can work out 20 minutes a day, but consistently over a long period of time, it will reap rewards for you, even if you don't see them immediately. And so every time I talk to people about starting brands, starting a platform, I really encourage them to say, you have to have a mindset that this will take, you've got to commit it for at least 2 years. At least 2 years. I don't care what it is. If it's a meetup group, if it's a blog, if it's a newsletter, if it's a podcast, if it's a conference, whatever it might be, minimum 2 years. Then look at the results, and I can guarantee you will have made some progress, right? Regardless for how you measure success, whether that be you've met a new business partner, whether that be you've actually raised money. Like I can't say that X amount of investors have come from my podcast, but I can say that it's definitely helped get the message across and build confidence really, really quickly. But I can't measure it, if that makes sense. So back to your point of like, yeah, looking back on the journey that you come across, give yourself time to allow it to blossom and allow it to resonate with your brand and changing people's perception of you in order to then build a company around that particular platform.
I think that's great, and something that so many people can take a really great lesson from, of expand your time horizon. Don't expect to be an expert at something just getting started at it. But Reed, backtracking a little bit to talk about the podcast, and one of the things that both myself and Dan enjoy so much about the podcast is very similar to you, and I think exemplified by the conversation we're having. It's fun to have conversations with like-minded people that are in similar businesses to us. But I'm going to take this time to selfishly learn from your experience of doing something that Dan and I are in the process of doing. So when you got started, you started out with a triplex in upstate New York. You had an engineering background, so you knew the business and understood what goes into development and that sort of thing. but you start out typically raising money from the 3Fs, or friends, families, and fools. Tell us a little bit about making that transition from raising money from those 3Fs into getting into the institutional arena, the family offices, the private equity firms, those types of people.
Yeah, so just to be brutally honest, even after all these years, we still only raise from those 3Fs. We are starting to entertain more family offices and institutional. We've had like single check writer deals, one or two of them, but you have to do like the old saying of you go approach a private equity firm. It's like, go get experience, then come back. You go get that experience, and you're like, oh, you're a syndicate. That's a dirty word. Like, I don't want to do business with you. It's like, you can never win. So there is an element of you got to go out and have that track record. And I even still think today, like both sides of the coin, friends, family, and syndication world, private equity world, people who are on the institutional side will look over here and say, oh, wow, look what all the money you're raising. And then on the other side, you look back and say, well, look, oh, you got big, really deep pockets, and raising money from investors in today's environment is really, really tough. Like, I'd love to be over on the private equity side. So there's always going to be that ebb and flow. I think it's trying to, again, not run your own race in the sense that you've got to know that if you're doing something and raising money from friends and family and it's working, keep doing that. Keep building on that. I think building your own brand, no one can ever take that away from you. And so as you attract the thousands of people through your brand, you're going to get the friends and family with the smaller check writers. But you may snag a whale, right? And you may snag that one investor who has deeper pockets to invest in your next deal that helps propel you down the street. So there isn't one silver bullet to answer your question. I've been on that side. I've seen it, but it's been limited compared to the retail side, which has also been, which we can talk about, the euphoric run of since 2012 when I moved to the US, why that's been. The Jobs Act change in 2012, and that has allowed the last 10 years of retail investment into directly with sponsors, which has changed the game, which I think, all of us here at this table are benefiting from, So there's also an element of timing as well that has really played into why we've seen the growth in the areas that we're all actively pursuing, i.e. raising money from the crowd.
Absolutely. And I think you make a great point, and it's always fun to learn from people who are further ahead than us as we're approaching this, and because it's so attractive to be able to say, okay, I need to raise $10 million for this project. It seems easier to go to one person that has $10 million that they can write a check for rather than 30 people that are giving, chunks of $100,000 here and there. Now that you've developed this track record and you have all these success stories with your friends and family, and you've got these different platforms, do you feel like you're at the point where people are coming to you to invest rather than you coming to them? Or what do you feel like kind of that balance or that scale is?
The last 12 months has been tough. It's been tough for anyone out there, institutions and syndication. And that's a real good lesson for everyone to know. Like, we have done 24 odd deals in the last 10 years raising money. The two deals we did last year, which was 2023, it was a really, really tight year. It was the first two deals, and they were more moderate sized deals. Were definitely not the biggest deals we've done. And we struggled to raise capital. Even our co-GPs struggled to raise capital. Even some bigger platforms we use, which we can mention, struggled to raise money. And that is, you can be as good as you want on your podcast and your brand and your messaging and being out there and constantly posting. But if the economy's still in the shit or perceived to be in the shit, excuse my language, it's going to be hard to raise money even on the institutional side. So, again, there's no silver bullet. The US economy, the global economy will roll, and we as capital raisers and syndicators and private equity, we are at the whim of that. And I think that was a really big lesson coming out of 2023, that you're not bigger than the global economy. You're not bigger than the US economy. It will crush you if you don't set your business up successfully. And having, tools like a platform and keeping your message out there means you've got to double down on those times. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just something more of there is never a time when you're not raising capital, and how the economy overlays with that means it might be really freaking easy, or it might be the hardest thing to squeeze blood out of a stone.
Interesting. So we want to transition into what you're buying, current state of the market, all of that. But before you kind of brought a question to mind with what you're saying. So you still closed 2 deals last year. You successfully raised money for them. Can you speak to a little bit, how were you able to still do that given the environment? Was it that the deal was so good it just made sense? Is it that these people know and trust you to such a degree that Reed says it's a deal, it's a deal? Maybe it's a dumb question, it's a combo of both, but can you speak to that a little bit, just how you were able to do it in spite of the circumstances?
Yeah, we actually, and I lie, we have a development deal that we also raised multiple millions of dollars on for a deal that we're building in the same market. So a little bit different flavor. But to your question of why, so when I hear people saying putting pencils down, that's so stupid. Never ever put your pencil down when you're underwriting deals, because even in slow times, we were seeing deals change in real time. And you go look at a CoStar or a real page, and the data to flow through to that doesn't occur if there's no inventory or no registration of sales. So unless you're underwriting deals from the brokers in real time, we saw cap rates adjusting in lockstep with the Fed fund rate, and we saw price swings within 12 months of more than 25%. Yet you go look at CoStar or you go look at some of those other stuff, that data hasn't trickled through yet. So understanding was that late last year. Late last year. We had looked at it 18 months earlier, and they wanted 30% more per pound for that deal. Fast, we couldn't make it work. So now we were able to get it under contract at a much more attractive basis, and having that story really, really helped sell it to investors. The second thing was we just closed on another deal in the same market, and we came in $1 million less than the highest bidder. But because we had a track record of closing in a difficult market with difficult sellers, we were awarded the deal. So a couple of things there, like tracking data in real terms, and never put the pencils down. Keep underwriting, even if you don't think you're going to buy the deal. Keep looking at deals. It's so important to have your underwriting team collect the data, review it weekly. The second thing is obviously having a good track record. Easier said than done. The third thing is having a story. And because we'd already seen the deal 18 months earlier, we could just dust off the model, where they've come from, where it really compare to why we think this is a good deal in today's environment.
Yeah, that was excellent, guys. Rewind and listen to that again, because he made 3 very important points there. So all that to say, Reed, let's get into today, what you're doing, what you're seeing, how you're dealing with refis, assuming you have some coming up. But I don't like to generalize. Can you give the audience a little background on where your assets are, what parts of the country, and then is it all apartments, or are you investing in other sorts of commercial real estate?
Yeah, so we're in Arizona, Texas, and the Carolinas. We have so the refi questions around like how many deals you got floating rate debt. We have one deal that's a little bit got floating rate debt, but we're working that out with and we're going to survive to live another day. But in general, most of our deals have fixed rate debt on it, and I think that is really, really, really important to the fundamentals of the pain you're hearing or seeing in the multifamily space stems from high leverage, low interest rates, floating rate product, bridge product. And, a lot of it's good. It's a good tool to use in the right circumstances, but a lot of groups have used it in the wrong circumstances. And then when back to the big behemoth of the US economy changes, i.e. what's happened, we went from 0% Fed rates up to 5.5% in 18 months time, that's going to crush a lot of people in terms of cost of interest, cost of debt, and then certain financial tools like interest rate caps. So, and it's also going to affect asset prices. Obviously, when interest rates go up, asset prices come down. So we are continuing to look at multi. We think the fundamentals are still there. There is a lot of supply right now, which is a problem and causing rents to soften across the Sunbelt. But the good news is, I personally believe we have hit the bottom and we're starting to come back up. And I think we hit the bottom. You can argue late last year, early this year, but at NMHC, you're hearing a lot more people being confident about where deals are going. You're seeing more deals transact right now, and we are seeing deals at very good basis, and we're in best and final on a handful of deals that are out there. And we're also seeing that like the good deals and newer vintage deals that are trading, it is being bid up like 30, 40 offers, which is insane. So there's a lot of pent-up demand to place capital, and there's still a very good argument for multifamily as a base asset class from the long-term fundamentals. It's just how you're picking and choosing the right deal at the right time in the right market, and there's a lot of things that go into that.
Absolutely. And Reed, one of the main points I want to take out of there to emphasize is what causes so many of these deals that could be potentially, single, double, triple, or home run deals to go south is the debt structuring that you're doing on it, where if you're underwriting this deal and assuming you're going to have a long-term play and you're able to get that fixed rate debt financing in place for it, you're not going to see these disaster projects. And as a corollary to that, I got a text yesterday about a failed development outside of Austin, Texas. Allegedly, it's worth $5.5 million. They're trying to get rid of it very quickly for $3.5 million. And so there's blood in the water right now. But with that being said, you're not the only person that's smelling that blood in the water. There's a lot of people at the institutional level that have been sitting on the sidelines while all of these more macro events are going on. So they're jumping in. So competition is fierce, which goes back to another point that Reed made of never put your pencils down. Just because it might not be perfect right, today or 6 months or 6 months ago, this might be a great deal if it's a 20-year hold. So just some things to think about in the long term with all of this. But Reed, with these deals that you're looking at right now, Dan and I are both familiar. Those are very similar markets to us. We're in Arizona, Texas, Colorado, the Carolinas, and Florida primarily for both of our businesses. Whenever a deal comes onto your desk, what is it you're really looking at right now in terms of how are you, within your role, within your company, how are you underwriting it? What are you looking at? How long does it take for you to go from put on your desk to, yes, let's move forward with it, we're ready to go?
Look, I think the big thing is we are underwriting everything that hits the market in any of one of our markets that we're in. We just, regardless of what if we can afford it or not afford it, we want to underwrite it for the data. That's what we're underwriting it for. Now, there's certain levels of underwriting, right? There's a very quick, dirty napkin underwriting. And then there's like, hey, I've owned and sold in some markets, and this asset's coming back around at whisper prices that I'm like, this could be interesting. Now, we'll also say there are deals out there that the whisper has been at a certain level, and I'm coming in, 15% below that. And I've called the broker and said, mate, I'm respectfully not bidding because I don't want to offend you. He's like, no, actually, you're coming right in at where everyone else is coming in at. And so hearing that, okay, let's party, let's boogie. Getting that on a plane, I was in Phoenix earlier this week. I was in Texas, San Antonio, and Austin last week, touring a bunch of deals. Getting that on site is really important. And it's part of my role, but we're actually transitioning positions right now, and we're hiring a new head of acquisitions. We have underwritten, like last year, we underwrote 130 deals, and that's full underwriting. We toured 45 of them. We offered on 30, and we won 2. So there's you got to look at a lot of product, and that's majority of that is on market. And, people love to say you can get off market deals, but in the 100+ unit space, you guys know the kingmakers are the brokers in each market. And, someone who owns a 150 unit property, regardless of the vintage, is going to be like, look, I'm going to try and sell this with a broker because they're going to have the best chance of selling it. Sure, maybe sub 50 units, you can get the mum and pop. That's great, but we're not in that space. So, we are looking at quote unquote pocket listings from both brokers, and it's off market, but it's not really off market. And they've showed it to 3 or 4 other groups. So, so that's we're looking at that. We're also pivoting and looking at some other more land development stuff. I mentioned before, build for rent. We're really bullish on build for rent. We're also looking at RV parks as well, building RV parks. I think that's a big shift towards that space, and also medical office space as well. So starting to expand what we do as a company, being backed still by real estate, but having maybe a different flavor from the traditional multifamily, given the supply story. But it will change and it will ebb and flow. And I think we're all young enough to know that this is our first sort of downturn, and it's good that we're experiencing it, and it'll make us stronger investors in the future.
Yep, absolutely. And so I forget the exact number, but 130 some deals fully underwritten, a couple dozen offers, and 2 deals. I think that's an important point for people to understand. If you want to buy good deals, you got to make a lot of offers in pretty much any market. I think the scenario that many people who are investing in early 2010s, that is once in a lifetime. It's more normal to have to make a lot of offers to get good deals. Number 2, you mentioned that you think we're probably or just past the bottom, which is, it's really interesting in that I was talking to Mason about this the other day, where has there ever been a major asset crash where everyone was expecting it? I don't think so. And everyone's been expecting it in commercial. And so just like what you referenced in your floating rate debt deal, where you are working it out, you'll be fine. Because everyone's anticipating problems because of the rate change, banks and the owners of those properties started working things out and making contingency plans ahead of time. And so there hasn't been this massive calamity across the multifamily market because everyone was expecting it. And so they were taking prudent action accordingly, right? But to that end, Reed, something I wanted to ask you, you said you have fixed rate debt on most of your deals, and we're talking 100 plus units. So I haven't heard about that very frequently. Most people are stuck with short 5 to 7 year loans where the rate can change and there's a balloon at the end. And so can you talk a bit about how you're getting that sort of debt and the structure?
Yeah, look, to your point, so it's all Freddie and Fannie, 5 or 7 year terms. We've got a couple of 10 years. I'm talking more about that really short stuff, the bridge stuff, which is like 3 years, 3 plus 1 plus 1. That stuff we're not touching anymore. One is because it's just too bloody expensive. But the beauty about the Freddie and Fannie is that they've got to put money on the street and they're still lending, right? The difference is from between now and 2008 and 9 is that no one was lending back then. Everyone was burnt. We're still getting deals done today, and you can still buy like cool stuff where you can buy down the interest rate and have positive leverage going in day one, which means the going in cap rate is higher than the interest rate, which means you're going to have good cash flow. And if you can have a value add strategy, it even adds to that. So investors want that, right? Investors are starting to get more savvy about like when they're getting capital calls and saying, well, why am I getting a capital call? It's like, oh, there's things called an interest rate cap is coming due because we got a 3-year bridge and it's we only bought it for 2 years, we've got to buy another one. People are becoming more savvy. So they're wanting to see, a 5, 7 year, 10 year type of horizon on the debt. So it's not ever becoming as a problem. Now, I own deals to this day that I put 10-year debt on for a 5-year business plan, and we're now in year 7. So and that was from my, naivete back in the day, but it is, it's now helping us. But I could have sold those deals 3 times over in that period of time, but because of the defeasance, which you could talk about, it was going to be cost us way too much. So we decided to hold. And now we're looking like champions because we're holding through a downturn. But, you could also say that we could have sold that thing multiple times if we didn't have that type of debt on it. So really understanding the type of debt and what your business plan is and what your investors are expecting and how to sort of navigate that fine line is really important. And the role of the sponsor, right? That is our role to make sure we are placing the correct debt at the correct time. And I think a lot of people are learning lessons over the last 24 months, coming from, near zero interest rates into, a 5-fold increase, that they're really starting to check themselves about what type of debt they're putting on properties.
That's fantastic. And I think it's so crucial for people to understand, because this is what can cause so many deals to go wrong. So understanding what your risk tolerance is, what your investor's risk tolerance is, and the more conservative you can be with the debt, the better off you're going to be. I mean, on the personal side of, if you can get a 30-year fixed mortgage versus a 15-year fixed mortgage, get the 30-year on your personal residence. And if you want to pay it off early, but at least you're not going to be stuck with that high monthly payment. If you can want to see how that translates to the single individual level. You mentioned build to rent communities. I love build to rent communities. It's something that I'm starting to spend some more time and work with people in the space, especially out in the Sun Belt. Actually, I love it because of depending on where you are within the deal, whether you're providing the capital for the developer or you're the builder or you're the person on the back end buying it. Typically, you have a decent amount less risk because you don't have to worry about that end buyer financing if you have a big group coming in to buy it. So with build to rent, talk to us a little bit more about what you're doing in that space, what you're looking for, the perfect build to rent deal.
So we are doing a true entitlement play, which means we're finding the dirt, tying it up with a seller carry because it's not changing of use. It's all by right, which means I can build a certain density of units on there, but we're going through the headache, like a hole in your head, with the local cities and municipalities to get deals approved. And we are then making assessments, whether we execute on the horizontals and then sell it to there's a lot of groups out there who just want pad ready sites. So we don't have to take on the risk, but we've taken on the entitlement risk. So it just depends on like the one site we're doing right now. And we're not deep into 10, 15 deals, but we've got one site. We successfully raised money last year. We had a good story. It came seller carryback finance. We were able to be able to execute. And now we're just sitting at the whim of the city. We're about to pull permits in the next, hopefully 30 to 40 days. It's been longer than what we thought, but we're hearing that across the country, everything from LA all the way through to Florida, all the way through to Texas. Municipalities are choked up for some reason, and it's taking longer to approve. But also that's not necessarily a bad thing when interest rates have skyrocketed. So we are set on our pricing now in terms of what we bought the land for. Yes, there's variability on the construction, but the fact that it's taking a little bit longer in the city is allowing the market to sort of teeter out a little bit more rather than having those super roller coaster highs and lows of what we've been seeing in pricing. So we are really, really bullish on that as well. We're also really, really bullish on that the RV space, tiny home communities. I think that's going to be a big shift. We toured some in Austin last week, and we just think you can just see where it's going. And the beauty about some of the build for rent stuff and the RV stuff is that it costs you a lot less equity, rightly so, to get those deals going. Yes, there's no cash flow compared to say a $20 or a $30 million multifamily deal. I remember when I got started, like the average syndication was $10 to $15 million. The average syndication today is probably $30 to $40 million, depending on size deals. We could go do a number of build for rent communities with that same amount of money. So it's just about like how much money you got to raise, what's the risk, what are you good at, what's the mousetrap you built out. So we're just trying to build out more mousetraps within the business because we have the capability of what we know. And as different industries change within the real estate business, you can sort of flex between different verticals.
That's amazing. And what's so beautiful about everything you're saying right there is, depending on who you are that's listening to this podcast, there's so much opportunity whenever you're doing a project like this, where you're starting out with a big piece of raw land, you're taking it through the entitlement process and getting all the approvals from the cities and doing utility expansion and road expansion. And at every level, the amount of money that you're putting in to, whether it's just the paper lots or the horizontal infrastructure or vertical, you are multiplying the value significantly above the amount that you're putting into it. And especially for myself and Dan, who own land companies, land acquisition, sales, and development companies, if you can take that skill of going direct to seller and get that land at a lower basis, you're even further ahead. Because I know there's so many land flippers that are listening to this, and something that's different to the 100+ unit space, you can go get a big piece of raw land outside of a growing community off market a lot easier than you would be able to go do that on on 100+ units. So super fascinating stuff that you're working on, Reed, with that build to rent. And then I guess on that deal or on the deals that you're doing there, are you planning on, at this point with the one you're working on, holding it as well, or do you plan on exiting after the entitlements and horizontal?
Yeah, it's a very good question that we've been tossing up. And back to we all look at ROIs. What is our biggest ROI? So you mentioned very wisely, then I'll break it down. Like we bought 7 acres for $1.5 million right in the heart of San Marcos. And we're going to build a 67 build for rent community on there. So we know that the price of the basis we're into that deal, including entitlements, we then now need to look at, okay, what's it going to cost us? We're at the entitlement stage right now. What's it going to cost us to sell per lot? Or if we go to the next level, what's it going to cost us if we spend another $1.5 million and we put in the horizontals? Well, that price per lot just went up. And that $1.5 million, you could get a 3x multiple on that $1.5 million. Well, let's go do that. Well, and then what about the vertical? Well, what we've found is that depending on who you sell it to, your multiple on the money you spend at each stage actually diminishes as you go through to vertical. So it's like, well, maybe we need to exit at the horizontal stage because we're getting the best bang for our buck. And we can recycle the money and go buy deal number 2. Now, the ego in me wants to go and build it and have the shovel break, ground breaking ceremony and all that crap and have the local mayor. Love that. But, we're also got to be smart with our investors' money, take the win if we can and move on to the next one. So, you have to always analyze those types of things as you get data in real time. It goes back to never put the pencils down. Things have changed, right? Cost of construction's gone up in the last 12 to 18 months. We've had that deal for the last 12 to 18 months. It's going to be really attractive to that developer who doesn't want that headache, and they're trying to offload deals right now at finished product stage, but they don't want to have to go and start a project from scratch and have to go through all the entitlements. So they're willing to overpay for a particular pad-ready site that we don't even have to take on the construction risk then. It's sort of like a win-win for both parties. So we're exploring all those options and more.
That's great. And there's a reason that developers are the richest people I know, because they know when to exit on these deals and they don't have to manage the construction crews. But Dan, I know you have a question.
Yeah. So as a corollary to Mason's question, I remember seeing in your bio, you mentioned reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think in 2009 or something like that, and that inspiring you. It was the same for me, right? I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, went and bought a duplex several months later. So to that end, with everything I do, and I would imagine you think the same, right? Where you're making money that's shorter term, where you're exiting, you're not holding. Where are you, or are you putting money anywhere personally for the long term so that 40, 50-year-old you has some trophy assets that are just yours, or maybe you and a couple partners that are producing? Are you doing anything in that regard? Anything permanent?
Yeah, well, permanent, so to speak. Like I look at it like planting oak trees. All the I've got a lot of 20 odd deals where I'm a GP, and we've sold a handful of them, but we've still got a ton right now. And those are those long-term investments that right now, if we sold today, I probably wouldn't get a lot of money out of those deals. So you have to hold, right? And and if you can, you will. So as you build wealth, we're then putting deals back into the money back into the business. The deals that I did sell, I was able to reinvest that money into new deals that allowed us to attract more capital. So it's not directly saying I'm putting this in a nest egg and it's going to sit there, but it's allowed the money I have made in the last 5-7 years has reinvested in the business, has attracted different capital because I'm investing large chunks of money. There's all this sort of trickle-on effects that happen from selling some earlier deals. But in saying that, we're also looking at other things like potentially buying existing businesses, right? Which is a whole other podcast that you could talk about in itself. Around the RV side, looking at building the tech behind it so you can sell it like the Hilton, which Hilton doesn't actually only dirt, but they're around the tech management, which could be a business in itself. So there's other ways that we, as you start mentioning the duplex. You went from duplex to flipping. You went from flipping to buying small multifamily. You went to small multifamily to buying big multifamily. You go from big multifamily to buying retail backed by grocery chains, retail backed by medical, build for rent. You might even then go into building businesses. So there's a lot of things, it's the skill sets you pick up along the way that as the market ebbs and flows, as certain verticals become less and more attractive, less attractive, you've got that skill set to consistently be able to pivot and not kill anything you've already built or working on, but it maybe can come off the boil a little bit, like, multifamily has come off the boil in the last couple of years, rightly so. Maybe it's the right time to jump back in the pool, but also we've realized that we've got to go create other verticals to future-proof our own business. And so coming back around to your question, it's around not necessarily just relying on one widget to create wealth for me. It's around creating multiple widgets in the business to future-proof. And I think the best wealth creation is real estate. But I also think one of the even bigger wealth creations is creating business ecosystems. So what business can help, by finding land, entitling land, building multi? That's an ecosystem that you can continue has a loop on itself. Maybe there's buying a property management company. Maybe there's only a construction management company. There's all these verticals that you can potentially go into. I haven't done any of those, but you can see where the big boys and girls play, that they've created an ecosystem around every element of their business. And that is very, very attractive as you start to learn more about picking up the crumbs of this journey of entrepreneurialism.
No, I like that. I asked that question because I really just wanted your opinion on that. I was curious how you think about it in the long run, and your emphasis on leveling up your skill set, I think, is important there. And also the diversification that comes with everything you just said, where I think it was Ray Dalio. I just read a quote. I could be wrong. It might have not been him, but I think it was, where he said there's pretty much a guarantee that at some point in your lifetime, if you live a normal lifespan, if you stick with one asset, it'll go down by 50% or more at some point. Something will go horribly wrong. And that's a great point. And I think that, emphasizes your overarching point of having multiple asset classes how to invest in, and even within each, continually leveling up your skill set to bigger and bigger and more profitable per hour deals.
Yep, that's it.
Awesome. Well, Reed, as we move towards the end of this hour, are there any questions that you wished we had asked that we did not?
No, guys, you're doing an incredible job. Appreciate just me allowing to rant on here a little bit and share my two cents about what I think of the world where we sit today and how you go build it. And the beauty of all this, guys, is that I moved to this country not thinking I'd be sitting here talking about all this stuff, and I'm just turned 38. When the time I'm 48, I could be doing something completely different, and that's exciting. You know what I mean? Like, not that you get shiny objects, but the fact that Tony Robbins says you overestimate what you can do in a year, but you underestimate what you can do in a decade. And I think I look back on my life and the 12 odd years I've been here, and it's just like, wow, that's come to fruition and has come true. So sort of having the ability to know that it will work itself out regardless of what is thrown at you is another skill set you have to develop as being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And I agree. This has been a ton of fun. I think there's a lot of similarities, a lot of synergies on the work that we're all doing here. And I think it'd be fun to do another show with the three of us and go through some different thought experiments of, I think to not call it shiny object syndrome, of that's what we're focusing on doing, is building these ecosystems of different businesses where business is all the same. My background's, I was a hospital CEO before moving into real estate investing, and healthcare and real estate are not that different. And I mean, it's all kind of the same. And I think just chatting about what businesses to look for, how to build a business ecosystem would be a ton of fun for us to do. And, I'll start cutting us off here so we don't have a 12-hour podcast together. But Reed, where can people find more out about you?
You can head to reedgoossens.com. That's ReedGoossens.com. That's all the personal branding stuff. If you want to also check us out on what we're investing in, it's RSM Property Group.com. And you can follow me across all the socials, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. And if you're ever coming through Los Angeles, you want to meet up and go for a surf or go for a beer, you can hit me up at info@reedgoossens.com.
Perfect. I was going to ask you how much for a surf lesson. So anyways, guys, all of that will be linked in the show notes. For now, Dan Habercost and Mason McDonald with the Big Picture Blueprint, signing off.